Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, August 21st, 2018. What do you want to talk about today? Anybody got any ideas for doing a show? If so, come on over to Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters. It's nice and cool in here now, I must say, and I think we're being at least a little bit less environmentally damaging because we have got one of the... when you get a new air conditioner these days, you get one that uses a new, hopefully less harmful coolant, and not the old Freon that it was always a problem, and it's particularly a problem when it leaks out of your system and I guess into the atmosphere. Sorry about ruining the earth, everybody. Wish I had been able to get to that sooner. And I guess I'm not that sorry, because I don't think this coolant is particularly good for the atmosphere either, but that's the way it goes in air conditioning world. We could go back, let's all go paleo and live in unair conditioned conditions. Apparently, around the world, people still continue to do this. We just need to move into some kind of nice, cool, natural cave or something that stays around the same temperature all year round. That would be fantastic. There are such places. It would be very crowded, I think. But hey, we could give it a shot. Anyway, enough apologies for having to pause yesterday and take the day off in order to spare you the noise of having the air conditioning system changed, not to mention the possibilities that our electrical power would be interrupted, etc., etc. But I guess the big apology is having to miss the contributions of Greg Dworkin, who will be with us tomorrow. But it's always difficult to tell Greg that we're going to miss a day, that, of the 3 days that he's able to be on, I hate to miss any of them and miss his roundup of the news. And, of course, it's particularly hard to miss an hour or nearly an hour of cruise control on the show, right? We just get to listen to Greg and I get to say, oh, that's interesting, or I didn't hear that, or what article are you talking about, or why don't I understand you, or I just got a message from Armando that says you're wrong. And it's enjoyable that way. Things to catch up on, and of course, the things that he's collected for you, he's keeping a secret. Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the very dangerous secret of what went on at her town hall meeting. I guess I should be done with this already. I didn't have a chance to comment on it yesterday. Really, it should have been done yesterday. I should have been 3 days bored to death with this thing. But, it continues to be a topic among now a very small portion of Twitter chatterboxes. Mixed feelings, as with all things about her. In the way she handled this thing. And I guess what's still got there, if there are still people, and there are, who are willing to say they're up in arms about this thing still, then I guess it would be about, it appears in the main, to be about, the problem is she's really just not ready for prime time as a candidate because her campaign and she herself gave several different explanations as to why they closed this event. And I don't have any articles on it. I don't care that much. So I may not really have gotten all of, who knows, whether I've gotten all the facts straight on it at this point. But it seems she had a town hall event that she wanted closed to the press, which is unusual in the sense that it never happens. It's not done. If you have a public town hall meeting, I don't know that anybody has ever bothered to ask the press to leave, or not to admit them. But ultimately, this thing seemed to me to break down along the lines of semantics. They argued back and forth, the two sides did. The people either representing her campaign or particularly enthusiastic about her campaign. And on the other side, I suppose, people who aren't particularly enthusiastic about her campaign for various reasons. And also members of the media and those who saw the very valid point that members of the media were making about access and how it's just not really a thing that you do to say I'll have a public event and not allow the press to attend. But after a couple rounds of back and forth, some of them making very interesting observations. For instance, that very often they close press is the condition that prevails, I should say. I probably should not even say it that way. I should say it some other simpler way. Like when politicians have fundraisers, they are very often closed to the press. And interesting argument to see people make that, when you pay $1,000, $5,000, $50,000 per plate for one of these enormous fundraisers for very rich people with a very prominent politician, no one bats an eye. Really, an eyelash, I would think. I don't know if you can bat your eye. You can get hit in the eye with a bat. Anyway, you don't want to bat an eyelash, but an eye for short, I guess, at the event being closed to the press. So in other words, the point was rich people can buy privacy from the press, but relatively poor people, I suppose, can't do it without making some sort of contribution. So it was an interesting fight watching people trade hypotheticals. So if they made it a $5 per person fundraiser and even waived the fees if you were a constituent or something, I don't know, something dumb like that. And could that be closed to the press? And, the press, I think, very reasonably did say, well, yeah, sure, you could do that. But then something, or why didn't she label it private in the first place? And I guess that's the place to land on that. If she had labeled it as some sort of private event rather than as a public town hall, then much, if not all, of this outrage over being excluded goes away. So, to me, there you go. That's settled. Next time, if you wanted to do this thing, and she gave eventually, I guess, lots of people who followed it more closely said that the explanations evolved, and they were angry about the fact that they had evolved and weren't simply formed whole and presented in a clamshell. I have no idea what they really thought they were going to get out of this, but the idea eventually evolved that if you had simply labeled it a private event, it would have been fine, and had she done that, it would be okay. And so, okay, sure, maybe in the future she will. However, then people insisted, no, she won't. She thinks she's right. She never will change it, and then all of our free press guarantees will evaporate, or something along those lines, or else, I wish that she had not evolved her position. She had just come out with this one from the get-go. I don't know. It seems to me like we're at this point battling over semantics. I don't see why she couldn't, in the eventual explanation, give some confidentiality to constituents who wanted to, and they're not constituents yet. That's also an important point. Potential constituents, voters who wanted to speak to her on a confidential basis or who just wanted to be able to speak openly with their neighbors without having it necessarily reported in the press. And I mean, when you put it that way, that seems like something that you ought to be able to do. I guess you have to make that decision ahead of time. But why the fight about it would go on for, I think, going on 5 days now, I have no idea. It seems like we've settled on a semantic formulation, a definition of the event that would exclude the press, allow her neighbors to have the discussion they want, and not leave her under attack for placing undue barriers in the way of the free press. So why don't we do that thing? And I'm not really sure why that isn't the end of the discussion, but people are, for some reason, really interested in focusing on her as this avatar of, I don't know, as though some different sort of campaign was going on, completely alien to this planet, let alone the country. I mean, it's different. She's approaching things differently. That's true. Some of the ways that she's approaching things that are different are very good, in my opinion, and some, I don't know about that. But I don't know. A lot of the arguments also seem to hinge on, well, public officials shouldn't do X, Y, Z. And reminder, she is not yet a public official, even if there's little to no chance that a nominated Democrat there, someone who's going to get the Democratic ballot line in that district, is just not going to lose that district and is going to be a public official. She's not one yet. And I guess I don't know if I'm terribly worried about the precedent that it sets for somebody who is not a public official but would like to be, consulting with people in public but in ways that don't necessarily show up in the newspaper. I don't know. I mean, I get the point that certainly if things were done differently, or I guess if things were been done similarly by a terribly evil Republican politician, might we have more questions? I suppose we might. Although, you know, if you were having a meeting with, say, white supremacists and the press were not allowed, you might, for a brief time, perhaps pretend to have questions about what was discussed there. But I think you have a pretty good guess about what was discussed there, and the reason you're upset about not being allowed in is that you will not then have proof that you're right about that. And on the other hand, I guess I'm curious about what nefarious purpose people think was being hidden from the public view at the town hall meeting in question. Were people planning to smuggle others over the border? Did they want to talk about a democratic socialist revolution overthrowing the capitalist system in this country? Maybe, but I don't think anybody has any serious idea of any nefarious purpose there. And you hope that wouldn't be the standard, because you're just guessing about one and, really just guessing about both of them. And although you'd be perhaps better founded in all of this by pointing fingers at the Republicans, because they're quite often very public about their interest in racist approaches to public policy. I don't know what exactly you'd point to with respect to this campaign, or really any other Democratic campaign. So I don't know. That struck me as interesting that this went on, and in some cases they certainly went a bit over the top. As a matter of fact, I just saw retweeted back into my own timeline Jay Rosen's comment on the comment of Los Angeles Times reporter Mariel Garza. Does she describe herself as something? She's not a reporter, opinionator and editorial writer covering politics, plastic, public utilities, and other exciting topics. Mariel Garza making the comment the other day, it's not a non-story when politicians such as Ocasio 2018, that's her Twitter handle, and real Donald Trump, that's his Twitter handle, treat reporters as enemy of the people, from whom the public needs protection. We are the eyes and ears of the people when they don't have the means or access to, I assume she meant, important events. It's an interesting point, but Jay Rosen's point, I think, a little bit better. We're just saying, you're serious? Closing an event to the press is on the same level as Trump's campaign to discredit journalists as enemies of a free society. You're leaving that up? You're not going to delete that tweet, in other words? And I don't know. I guess she hasn't to this point. And, that one struck me right off the bat. You know, politicians such as, really? I mean, what a comparison. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in her corner of, Queens and the Bronx, or, I don't remember which boroughs she was covering, but versus Donald Trump, President of the United States. Eyes and ears of the people when they don't have means or access to important events. It was a town hall meeting in a small corner of New York. It's a big deal to the people who live there, but I think presidential politics operates on an entirely different level. That seemed like a lousy comparison to make, but I guess they stand by it, or at least Marielle stands by her own comment, or more likely just didn't want to be seen as having been pushed into a corner and taking the tweet down for that reason, unless she's one of those people that just think deleting tweets is cowardly no matter how bad they are. I don't know. There are such people. Anyway, many other topics that we might turn to and cover that I'm sure will be of somewhat more interest to the rest of us, including, let's see. Oh, well, here's some news that's not news, I guess. Well, somebody found Steve Scalise's baggage. Apparently, you remember that member of Congress, Steve Scalise / Scalise, depending on how you pronounce it. I don't know how he pronounces it. Who bills himself through, no fault of mine. I didn't ask him to do it. This is something he did by himself, as David Duke without the baggage, which is an impossible thing to imagine, of course, because being David Duke is baggage. Being like David Duke is baggage. What he meant was, I think, David Duke without the paper trail, i.e. a Klansman about whom you cannot produce proof that he is a Klansman, a racist about whom it is difficult or impossible to produce evidence that he is a racist. I'm just simply a private racist, wink, wink, winking at you, that I intend to use my racism to help develop public policy. But you won't catch me at any, let's say, white supremacist events. Unless, of course, I admit to you later on that I did attend or might have attended white supremacist events, probably because, this isn't the reason I attended them, but the reason I acknowledge it to you as a possibility is you're about to catch me. In other words, you found my baggage. That's the story over at MSNBC, Benji Sarlin's story. Steve Scalise quoted as, I guess, saying, I might have attended white supremacist event, which is, for all intents and purposes, admitting, you got me. I was there. But I'm not ready to say, yep, I'm a racist just yet. Majority Whip Steve Scalise, and remember, he is a leading contender to take the top Republican leadership spot, whatever spot that may be, after the 2018 elections and whatever aftermath. But he says he abhors hate groups. I guess that's, how funny is that? I hate groups. But okay. But he acknowledged on Monday that he may have spoken, not just attended, may have spoken at a white supremacist conference led by the notorious former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke, whose baggage he doesn't have, in 2002. See, now, that's an interesting thing. I mean, I wonder if that's where he came up with the formulation of I'm David Duke without the baggage. I know I'm David Duke because I speak at the same events as David Duke, but I don't have the baggage, which is to say, if you say at the point where he was elected, the name Steve Scalise, people will not say, oh, you mean David Duke, the Ku Klux Klan leader? No, I mean Steve Scalise. I don't know who that is. That's the baggage he's talking about. I didn't know who all of these groups were, and I detest any kind of hate group. Scalise, the third highest ranking Republican leader in the House, told the New Orleans Times-Picayune, for anyone to suggest that I was involved with a group like that is insulting and ludicrous. I only spoke to them. The interview came hours after Scalise's office acknowledged that a report claiming that the Louisiana congressman spoke at a gathering of the Duke-run European American Unity and Rights Organization, or Euro, as a state legislator in 2002 could be accurate. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracks extremist organizations, has listed Euro as a white nationalist hate group. According to NBC News, an aide to Scalise said it was highly likely the congressman spoke before the group. I mean, come on, just say you did it. But Scalise told the Times-Picayune he had no memory of the event in question. Or maybe that's the baggage. I'm David Duke without the memory. He blamed a combination of overzealous campaigning and an overworked staff for his alleged appearance. Oh, boy. I don't support any of the things I have read about this group, but I spoke to a lot of groups during that period. I went all throughout South Louisiana, and I didn't see a single person of color. Scalise said, I spoke to the League of Women Voters, a pretty liberal group. Really, that's okay. So that's your both sidesing. I spoke to the Klan. I spoke to the League of Women Voters. So, conservatives, i.e. the Klan, and liberals, i.e. this nonpartisan group of women who vote. But, okay. I still went and spoke to them. I spoke to any group that called, and there were a lot of groups calling. The Democrat, I bet they weren't. As a state senator, I bet there weren't a lot of groups. The Democratic National Committee pressed Scalise to come clean on the speaking engagement, saying in a statement that the congressman's explanation was insufficient. That weak attempt at an explanation doesn't pass the smell test and raises far more questions than it answers, DNC Communications Director Mo Elleithee, how am I pronouncing this? Elleithe, Elleithee, said, sorry, Mo, he does not believe, or rather, does he not believe that speaking to an anti-Semitic hate group legitimizes them and elevates their racist and divisive existence? How abhorrent does a group have to be to decline their invitation? I spoke to a lot of groups. Any group that called, I guess. These questions are just the tip of the iceberg. Representative Scalise and all of Republican leadership need to start giving some real answers soon. The statement from Scalise's office was prompted by a report from blogger, yay, go bloggers, Lamar White Jr., who noted that posts on the white supremacist site Stormfront had praised Scalise for addressing Euro in person and being attentive to their concerns. Whoops, baggage. Representative Scalise brought into sharp focus the dire circumstances, pervasive and many important underfunded needs of the community at the expense of graft within the Housing and Urban Development Fund. What a convoluted accusation this is turning into. An apparent giveaway to a selective group based on race. One commenter with the username Alsace Hebert, that's Louisianan for Herbert without the first R, Hebert. Remember Hebert? Yeah, Bobby Hebert. You remember him. Wrote on the site at the time, but this is Alsace. He's a totally different guy. In 2004, after Scalise announced a run for Congress, Hebert wrote on the site, those that attended the Euro conference in New Orleans will recall that Scalise was a speaker, offering his support for issues that are of concern to us. I suppose if Duke does not make the election for whatever reason, this gentleman would be a good alternative. Maybe that's where he came up with the formulation. Scalise's office admitted earlier in a statement that the claims on Stormfront that he visited the Euro gathering could be accurate. Throughout, I mean, is this just another formulation of saying, well, I don't know, I talked to a lot of groups. Throughout his career in public service, Mr. Scalise has spoken to hundreds of different groups on a broad range of viewpoints. His spokeswoman, Moira Bagley-Smith, said in a statement on Monday, in every case, he was building support for his policies, not the other way around. What other way around? I don't even... What? Okay. You mean his policies were building support for him? I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Anyway, in 2002, he made himself available to anyone who wanted to hear his proposal to eliminate slush funds that wasted millions of taxpayer dollars, as well as his opposition to a proposed tax increase on middle-class families. That was huge in 2004. He has never been affiliated with the abhorrent group in question. The hate-fueled ignorance and intolerance that group projects is in stark contradiction to what Mr. Scalise believes and practices as a father, a husband, and a devoted Catholic. Duke was hardly an obscure figure in Louisiana politics at the time, of course. He gained national attention as a Grand Wizard of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and especially for his multiple runs for various political offices in the state, which included a successful election to the State House of Representatives in 1989, as well as a 1991 run for governor in which he forced a surprise runoff against Democrat Edwin Edwards. I do remember that. And, wow, what a contest that was. Anyway, by the way, to be Grand Wizard of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan strikes me as, I mean, it sounds like an important thing to be, I guess, if among Klans people. But the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and Grand Wizard, because there's Grand Wizards, there's Grand Dragons, there's Grand Poobahs of various different kinds. And it struck me that it's actually a little bit like the Tea Party thing where, you know, if I'm the head of the Tea Party. No, I'm the head of the Tea Party. Well, I'm the head of the Tea Party Express. Well, I'm the head of, you know, like the Tea Party Express. I liked that one too. Like, I didn't know whether they meant for that to be because they had a bus and the bus was the Tea Party Express, or whether this is like the, you know, the food court Pizza Hut Express where all the food is pre-made, like Express, Holiday Inn Express, Tea Party Express. Anyway, I don't know why they were doing that, but you noticed that everybody, if you weren't the leader of your Tea Party group and no, they wouldn't elect you leader, you could just form your own, throw the name Tea Party in there. So I'm the Grand Wizard of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I'm the Grand Dragon of the Soldiers of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I'm the Grand Poobah of the Water Buffalo of the Ku Klux Klan. Just make yourself that thing. No one's going to oppose you for it. There's nobody else in the group. Anyway, Duke, for his part, told the Washington Post that Scalise was a nice guy and that his aides had invited him, it should be in there, I guess, to the Euro event, but that he didn't personally watch Scalise speak. His own speech was delivered remotely, and was unsure if the congressman was aware of the conference's political agenda. It's so good to see all of you out there in your white peaked caps. Are you disguised collectively as a mountain range? What is it that you're doing? You're all talking about white supremacy. Why is this happening? I think it was probably pretty obvious. By the way, the 2002 Euro conference apparently occurred the same year that Mississippi Senator Trent Lott stepped down as majority leader after praising former Senator Strom Thurmond's 1948 run for president on a segregationist ticket, an incident that prompted greater scrutiny of Lott's ties to white supremacist groups, including an appearance before the Council of Conservative Citizens, which is another Southern Poverty Law Center-listed hate group. Lott apologized for his remarks about Thurmond, but left his position under pressure from Republican leaders who were afraid he would drag down the party's image. Memories. It's a long way. They've come a long way. They've evolved so far. The Republican Party has that, of course, would now get you a job in the White House. And it's sad that things have taken, have been thrown into reverse, but something we all know about and have lamented for some time. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue. I guess we'll just wrap up this Steve Scalise article. I don't think there's that much more by way of revelations here. Michael Musson commenting along the way, by the way, that Scalise would prefer to be known for his robust support of the gun laws that helped make his own shooting possible. I guess that could be the case. I don't know what he'd really like to be remembered for, but he'd certainly like to have everybody else forget that he ever said he didn't have this baggage. But anyway, let's wrap up the article here. There was the Trent Lott connection there. Scalise can, this, I don't know about this. Scalise, it is argued here, can expect a similar round of investigation. I don't know whether that's really the case. Perhaps in other circumstances, or if it had followed closely on Trent Lott's gaffe, I guess, then perhaps you might. But, this is, I don't know. I mean, I can't tell. Are we in an atmosphere where the racists are so thick and numerous that we haven't got time to focus on a relatively small fish like Scalise, even though he's the third ranking Republican in the House? Or does the fact that this keeps happening over and over again and rabid racists seem to rise to the highest ranks of the Republican Party with some frequency, and particularly so right now, will that fuel the fire for his further investigation? I don't know what to predict. I could see it going either way. Online commenters on Monday were quick to highlight his vote as a state legislator against making Martin Luther King Day a state holiday in 2004. One of only 6 nays on that vote, by the way. Sites like Little Green Footballs dug up a roll call article from 1999 in which Scalise discussed how he might compete with Duke in a special election for Congress by stressing electability. And here's the quote from that article. Another potential candidate, State Representative Steve Scalise, for Republican, don't forget that, said he embraces many of the same, quote, conservative, unquote, views as Duke, but is far more viable. The novelty of David Duke has worn off, said Scalise. The voters in this district are smart enough to realize that they need to get behind someone who not only believes in the issues they care about, but also can get elected. Duke has proven that he can't get elected, and that's the first and most important thing. A spokesman for Speaker John Boehner did not immediately respond to the Scalise news, but some Republican officials and right-leaning commenters offered up early reactions on Monday night. Oh, well, you know what? The fact that yesterday was Monday has me thinking that this was an article from yesterday. And now, only just now, do I realize that referencing as they do Speaker Boehner, I was wondering, like, were they asking him, what was he like when you were Speaker? Why would you do that? The article is from December of 2014. And now I know why this came up. I guess, I did see somebody, you know what, I don't know why it came up. I know I saw people tweeting about this yesterday and sharing this article, but now strikes me that I can't tell you what it's in response to, why this got dug up. Is it that I'm not certain what brought this back to the surface now that I think about it. All right, well, if you do, maybe you could drop me a hint and we can share that and everyone can be up to speed on this nonsense and figure out what's going on. Very interesting idea. Oh, look at this. This is sort of a weird looking item. Oh, no, I've clicked on something that I probably will wish I hadn't, and that was a goofy, yeah. See, these ads pop up in the way of things now. So here I'm trying to click on something good and something bad gets in the way. All right. So they asked Boehner. Boehner didn't respond immediately, but some Republican officials and right-leaning commentators offered up early reactions Monday night. How the hell does somebody show up at a David Duke organized event in 2002 and claim ignorance? Wrote Eric Erickson, co-founder of the, well, they say, influential conservative site Red State. In a blog post, Trent Lott was driven from the field for something less than this. It seems quaint, and this is 2014. Republican Congressman Steve King of Iowa defended Scalise to the Washington Post's Robert Costa, noting that, quote, oh, this is a good one, Jesus dined with tax collectors and sinners. So Steve Scalise is Jesus. So easy to understand now. Bobby Jindal, remember when he was governor of Louisiana? Well, in 2014, I guess he was. He also stood by Scalise in a statement. I know Congressman Scalise to be a good man who's fair-minded and kind-hearted. Jindal said, I'm confident he absolutely rejects racism in all forms. Well, he's dumb even then. Congressman Cedric Richmond, an African-American Democrat, also publicly vouched for Scalise. Yowza. Telling the Times-Picayune he doesn't think the congressman has a racist bone in his body. Where does he keep his racist bones, one wonders. More recently, Mississippi state officials and national GOP strategists attacked Tea Party candidate Chris McDaniel during his primary run against Republican Senator Thad Cochran for allegedly agreeing to appear at an event that featured a segregationist vendor. Wow. McDaniel denied planning to participate in the event, but his staff confirmed to reporters that he previously addressed a neo-Confederate group. Also a dumb idea. Scalise was elected to the number 3 position in the House GOP leadership earlier this year, that would be 2014 again, after a reshuffling prompted by former Majority Leader Eric Cantor's loss in a primary race to conservative challenger Dave Bratt. Everyone remember that? Okay. Well, we're up to date with the outdated news that Steve Scalise spoke to the Euro conference a million years ago, and don't let that fool you, he's a racist. Okay. I don't know why that got circulated again, but maybe I will, maybe I'll catch up with that one and figure out exactly what it was that brought that up. Okay. Well, anyway. Many other things to catch up with. I just saw flying by from Think Progress a piece that caught my attention with the headline, "All of George Papadopoulos' lies are laid out in a new Mueller filing." And this is definitely from this year. It's, in fact, from yesterday. Meanwhile, his lawyers make a new play to avoid jail time. He's, I guess, up for his sentencing soon. And I guess I should note in the last couple of days, a very weird play by his wife, who's totally Italian. Everybody says so. And says she was trying to, I don't know whether she was serious about this or what, but for some reason she began commenting to the press that she thought Papadopoulos, George, her husband, ought to seek to escape from or, exit the plea deal that he had made with the prosecutors in exchange for his testimony. But this was really hours or even days before a sentencing hearing, and I couldn't quite figure out why she would be interested in counseling him to do that. I guess, unless she just didn't really understand what was going on, but she seems pretty together, right? She's not out of it. She's not a bimbo or anything. She seemed to understand the implications of everything. I didn't say she was a genius, but she was well spoken, I thought, no matter the accent or whatever. And again, I'm sure that there are Italian accents that sound quite like that, and I'm not used to that particular one. Or maybe she's, maybe her I don't know. I don't know where she's from, but she's weird and suspicious to me. But she's not an idiot. I guess maybe she thought that, what eventually did happen here was going to happen. The prosecutors just didn't think he was forthcoming and didn't hold up his end of the bargain, and were going to recommend, therefore, that there be at least some jail time. And she probably thought, I thought the deal was for no jail time, so screw this, we should just quit the plea deal. But that doesn't mean you don't go to jail. That means you probably do later on. You go on trial yourself, and they dump all the evidence that they had on you as a defendant, and then you go to jail for much longer. It doesn't really work like, well, I don't like the way this deal is coming out, so I'll quit it and therefore not go to jail. That's not exactly it. Anyway, let's take a quick look, if there is such a thing as a quick look on this show at anything, but a quick look at a Think Progress piece. Well, who knows? Casey Michael. Let's see if you defy the norm here. Buried underneath the news about President Donald Trump stripping former CIA Chief John Brennan of security clearance, and new details to be revealed in Omarosa's forthcoming book, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office released a new document shining a bit more light on how a former Trump campaign advisor lied repeatedly to the FBI. On Friday, Mueller's office submitted a sentencing memorandum regarding George Papadopoulos, a former foreign policy advisor for the Trump presidential campaign, or maybe a coffee boy. Rather than a perfunctory one-page document listing a recommended jail sentence, though, the document reveals just how frequently Papadopoulos lied to FBI investigators in 2017 and just how many things he lied about. In fact, the document is here, but let's see if they excerpt it at all for us, because otherwise it's 10 pages. All told, the document recommends up to 6 months in prison for Papadopoulos, who signed the first guilty plea last year related to Mueller's probe. Papadopoulos is due to be sentenced September 7th. Which you may recall at one point George H.W. Bush, I think, which it was H.W., right, mistook for Pearl Harbor Day. But it's so easy to do. It rhymes, and it rolls off the tongue so easily. Anyway, the sentencing memo details the myriad lies Papadopoulos told FBI investigators in early 2017, lies that not only helped spin the Trump team's connection to emails stolen from Hillary Clinton's campaign, but that helped damage the ongoing probe into Trump's campaign's relationship with Russia. As the memo reads, Papadopoulos' lies were not only deliberate, but repeated. Over the course of 10 pages, the memo from Mueller's office lays out Papadopoulos' fabrications, which ranged from the timing of his contact with Joseph Mifsud, the European professor who initially revealed to Papadopoulos, then working for Trump's campaign, that Russia had dirt on Clinton, to his own role with the Trump campaign. As the memo read, the defendant's crime was serious and caused damage to the government's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. The defendant lied in order to conceal his contacts with Russians and Russian intermediaries during the campaign and made his false statements to investigators on January 27, 2017, early in the investigation, when key investigative decisions, including who to interview and when, were being made. The defendant was explicitly notified of the seriousness of the ongoing investigation and was told that he may have important information to provide. He was warned that lying to investigators was a federal offense that could get him in trouble. Instead of telling the truth, however, the defendant repeatedly lied throughout the interview in order to conceal the timing and significance of information the defendant had received regarding the Russians possessing dirt on Hillary Clinton, as well as his own outreach to Russia on behalf of the campaign. The defendant's false statements were intended to harm the investigation and did so. So congratulations, I guess, in that sense, but now you are, in fact, in trouble. The memo notes that Papadopoulos made false statements regarding Mifsud, claiming the professor was just a guy, despite the fact that Papadopoulos believed Mifsud, who's now missing, had substantial connections to high-level Russian government officials. Well, there's a problem. Mifsud hasn't been seen in nearly a year, skipping court appearances along the way. A spokesperson for the European Council on Foreign Relations, Mifsud's last known institutional affiliation, told Think Progress last month that Mifsud was no longer an ECFR member. So his lies, I guess, also gave Mifsud a chance to disappear if that's something he chose to do, or gave someone else the opportunity to disappear him. Well, that's not so good. Most importantly, perhaps, the memo also details how Papadopoulos' numerous lies impeded investigators' attempts to interview Mifsud, especially when Mifsud, who was interested in Papadopoulos only due to the latter's role in the Trump campaign, was in the U.S. in February of 2017. So, yeah, he escaped the clutches of the FBI thanks to Papadopoulos obfuscating and throwing them off the trail during those months. A few months thereafter, Mifsud effectively disappeared, leaving the questions about how and what he knew about Russia's obtaining of Clinton's emails in the air. While Papadopoulos may not see years in prison, the memo is nonetheless damning, especially as it pertains to those, like others in the campaign, who claim Papadopoulos was nothing more than a coffee boy. The memo should puncture some of the conspiracy theories that treat Papadopoulos as some kind of victim of an overzealous prosecutor out to get President Trump, or as an extraneous coffee boy, wrote Lawfare's Quinta Jurecic and Benjamin Wittes. I bet it won't do much to puncture any of those conspiracy theories, but in a logical world it might. It's also a good reminder that the investigation began not with the so-called Steele dossier, but with an approach to a Trump campaign figure with the offer of dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of emails, and that campaign figure then lied repeatedly about the approach to the FBI. For good measure, the memo also takes the time to refute claims that Papadopoulos was somehow forthright during the inquiry. That claim, undercut by Papadopoulos' repeated lies, has been pushed most notably by Papadopoulos' wife, Simona Mangiante Papadopoulos. The memo devoted an entire rebuttal to disputing her claims that Papadopoulos had voluntarily reported his conversations with Mifsud. To the contrary, the defendant identified Mifsud only after being prompted by a series of specific questions about when the defendant first learned about Russia's disclosure of information related to the campaign and whether the defendant had ever received any information or anything like that from a Russian government official. Mangiante, as it is, appears to have taken the memo in stride, tweeting about hashtag birthday, hashtag love, alongside a photo of her husband over the weekend. Mangiante's GoFundMe to help with legal fees is still struggling, failing to reach even 10% of her $75,000 goal. And that's good. Let her raise the money elsewhere. Thank you. I don't think she has a lot of money troubles. Papadopoulos himself hasn't commented on the sentencing memo. On Monday, however, his lawyers revealed to the Chicago Sun-Times that they would be pushing for no jail time for Papadopoulos. Well, that's what lawyers do. As to the repeated lies laid out in the memo, these misdirections were, as Papadopoulos' lawyers said, little more than mistakes of judgment. from the former Trump campaign advisor. I thought, in my judgment, that lying to the FBI investigators would be a good idea and would work, when in reality it was a bad idea and it didn't. So I had bad judgment. You can't just send me to jail for bad judgment, can you? You can. Oh, that's bad. Is it a crime to bet on sporting events? Yes, it is. Oh. It just reminds me of that's an old Simpsons episode, but I hope a classic with which you will all be familiar. Let's see. Another morning clip, actually from yesterday, but that really only crossed my desk this morning, late last night. I wanted to catch up with this one and see exactly what's behind this because it's a flashy headline, and I have it from The Hill here. Judge orders Michigan official to face manslaughter trial over Flint deaths. That's Flint, Michigan, and they're talking about the water. But is it exactly what we thought, or is it something different? I skimmed this a little bit last night, but I just wanted to share it and get a better fix on what's going on, and maybe you Michiganders can tell me what's up with this thing. A Michigan judge said Monday the state's health director will face criminal charges for 2 deaths linked to a Legionnaire's disease outbreak connected to the water crisis in Flint, the Associated Press reported. And so I'm curious, like I don't know that much about this branch of the problem. Legionnaire's disease deaths connected to the water crisis in Flint. I mean, this is not this is not criminal liability for the condition of the water there generally, but rather a very specific instance of Legionnaire's disease that when they say connected to the water crisis, I'm not sure I know how it's connected. But it does seem like big news. Nick Lyon, Lyon, will stand trial on involuntary manslaughter charges after Judge David Goggins ruled that he could have prevented the outbreak if he had notified the public of the city's water issues. Lyon's inaction amounted to corruption, the judge said. Lyon would not comment on the charges other than to tell the AP, Associated Press, that it's a long way from over. Lyon is now the highest-ranking state official charged in the state attorney general's investigation into the Flint water crisis, the AP reported. 14 other current or former officials have been charged, 4 of whom have reached plea deals. The state revealed in 2015, it's been going on for a long time now, that due to a switch in Flint's water source meant to save money, which was initiated by Governor Rick Snyder's administration, the city's water pipes had corroded, contaminating the drinking water with lead. It led leaders and politicians nationally to condemn Snyder, who has taken some responsibility for his role. I don't know if everyone would agree with that, but he's also put significant blame on state employees and alleged that they misled and lied to him. While Snyder and other officials announced the Legionnaire's outbreak in January 2016, cases were being reported a year earlier, according to the AP. The Environmental Protection Agency issued a 74-page report last month on how lead contaminated the drinking water in Flint. Wow, thanks for getting around to that, guys. EPA Inspector General Arthur Elkins said local and state officials didn't sufficiently protect the city water against lead, while the EPA didn't have the right structures in place to monitor compliance and enforce the federal protections, among other factors that contributed to the crisis. That doesn't clear up a great deal about the story for me, but perhaps, again, our Michiganders can fill us in a little bit and maybe get us a little more local color on the event. But I just wanted to grab a splashy headline, because they're few and far between, with respect to somebody getting in trouble for the lead contamination, etc., in Flint's waters. Okay, let's see. Other stories waiting in the wings here, and there are many of them. And the directions we could go. Let's try this one as a relatively short one for before the break, and then we'll get into some of the longer stuff afterwards. This one, Kate Sherrill sent along to me last night, and it comes out of Crooks and Liars, one of our friendly neighborhood blogs written by Caroli Coons, who says, Ginny Thomas, that is, say, Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, bullies Parkland teens with hateful meme. Wow. Well, I mean, it's their stock and trade and everything, but seeing her, of course, beat up on our young friends from Parkland is particularly stark. The meme, I guess, is this graphic displayed at the top of the piece here. Picture of, let's see, I can't, now I'm blanking on their names. I'm not sure I'm going to get all the names right, but the two, I guess, most prominent of the Parkland students, David Hogue, H-O-G-G. Did we ever decide does he say Hogue or Hog? I think Hogue, because something, somewhere along the line, I thought that was the case. And, what's her last name? And now I remember only her first name, Emma Gonzalez, that's it, who I think actually rose to prominence even faster than David did. She was the first one out of the box, and then he picked up the ball. Well, lately, I guess they've been a little more focused and a little less all over the place as America loses focus once again on a horrific school shooting. Anyway, the meme is a photo of the two of them, and it asks, has anyone seen these two? I figured they'd have a lot to say about the terrorist training camp for committing school shootings. But I don't know what the hell. Quite honestly, that's a very ineffective meme. I am not really sure what they're getting at. I heard the story, of course, that they're referring to, but why these two would have any particular comment about it, I am not 100% sure. But they feel certain that it's astounding hypocrisy that they didn't have something to say about a terrible child abuse case that took place in New Mexico. These two are, of course, 18, perhaps now 19-year-old students. Oh, I guess David's in a gap year. I know that. I don't know what Emma is doing. Did she graduate as well? David did. I don't know whether Emma was a graduating senior or not. Man, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. Anyway, the story goes like this. Ginny Thomas, lobbyist, occasional Daily Caller contributor. That makes her a terrible person by definition. Trump apologist, drunk dialer. Remember that story? Drunk dialing Anita Hill, of all people. Right-wing message coordinator and, oh yes, spouse of sitting Supreme Court Justice, believe it or not, Clarence Thomas. Must be on the NRA's payroll now, given her latest posting on Facebook. Alongside the nasty meme above, tying the Parkland survivors to the truly ugly story out of New Mexico about children being trained to shoot up schools, if that's really what was going on. As if that's a thing that young victims of a school shooting should be opining on, rather than, say, registering people to vote so we can get some decent gun safety laws on the books. Thomas felt compelled to bully those brave teenagers too. And here's the, I guess, quote from her Facebook posting. What makes radicalized Democrats, like David Hogue and others, so dangerous to the survival of our nation, really, is their total shameless hypocrisy. That's amazing, because that's what I feel about you. Thomas remarked with the photo. She also used the hashtag #WalkAway, which has been associated with Russian bots and trolls on social media sites. The originator of the meme is a group with no discernible roots called the Great American Movement. What a descriptive name that is. They posted the photo with this intro: the enemy of America is the radical fascist left. I've seen a lot of hand-wringing about how divided this country is. Make no mistake, this is intentional and originates from shadowy groups funded by God knows who, and the circulation of memes like this intended to bully and demonize the victims of a school shooting. It's not both sides. It's hate like this, circulated by an activist spouse of an activist justice, intended to promote that which they claim to condemn, fascism. Thank you, Caroli. And also an update down here at the bottom. Perhaps it is this article about Hogue and how he's spending his gap year that triggered her. Okay, let's find out. I'm just sort of curious how is he spending his gap year? I mean, I assume it's campaigning for gun safety laws. Let's see. Yes, but the article referenced here is a new one, August 19th, in the Daily Intelligencer. I guess describing how he's been spending his last year, and I think we all know how he's been spending his last year. I guess maybe it's the appearance of the article in the media that I suppose they think might have triggered Ginny Thomas into sharing this meme. I don't know what she thinks the hypocrisy is. I think I am just genuinely baffled by that. I guess the fact that it was alleged that the kids being abused in New Mexico, the person abusing them said that, well, what I was doing was training them to perpetrate school shootings. And I, one, don't know why someone would be doing that. And two, don't know why someone would say that's what they were doing. And three, don't know why I would believe things that an abuser and an abusive person like that would say he was up to. Like, I don't really know why that's an explanation I'm interested in. And I certainly have no idea. I mean, I guess if you forced the comment, they would say, I would rather people not be trained to shoot up schools. That is bad. We should not have that. And then beyond that, what kind of comment did Ginny Thomas think was lacking here? I mean, I think we all agree on that. Was it her idea that they actually were in favor of that? Who knows? I mean, with Pizzagate and other assorted weirdos out there, I guess it's entirely possible that there are conservatives who believe that anti-gun violence activists are really and truly pro-gun violence in the hopes that they can perhaps encourage yet more of those false flag crisis actor type situations that will convince the rest of America that we need gun safety laws, even if they have to stage them themselves. I suppose that's the only thing I can think of. God, people are nuts. Let's take a break for 1 minute and return to other forms of insanity. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time to come back from our short break. Lots of different little pieces to get to here. I got big ones, I got small ones. Let's see. Here's a relatively short one, I think. This one, I don't know, seems kind of fun. Let me share this one from the Daily Beast. I don't know what to say about this one. I guess I kind of think it's funny. And it's a gray area. But anyway, Daily Beast story by Kelly Wheel, Weill. Website promising free anti-fascists, you remember the Antifa, shirts. Website promising free anti-Antifa shirts was a trap. It's a trap. I really need the Admiral Akbar, it's a trap, comment on that one, but that sounded like the best suited music and the one I could find the easiest for that. Check this out. A website that offered free anti-fascist t-shirts for a real far-right march. I don't know how real the march is, by the way, but okay, appears to have been a trap set by anti-fascists. Well, what a good idea. On August 18th, Trump supporters, and this is an oldish article because, it's not that old. It's as old as it could possibly be and still have this sentence ring true. On August 18th, Trump supporters will host the blah, blah, blah. That is to say, this was written on August 17th. So on August 17th, they were able to say, on August 18th, Trump supporters will host the, quote, National March Against Far-Left Violence, unquote, in several cities. And I think they did do it, and I think it was like the Washington, D.C. Unite the Right 2, abject failure to which only a few dozen people at most showed up anywhere, which is why we haven't talked about it. But they apparently were going to host it in several cities, organized by a pair of frequent attendees at far-right rallies. Expected participants include, we should check up on how they did, members of anti-Muslim group The Proud Boys, they show up at anything, and people involved in the pro-Trump troll group Patriot Prayer, which has attracted white supremacists, and they were the ones that held the gathering. Was it, where did they do it? Portland? Was that right? Well, out west. Now I've already forgotten because their last thing was such a flop too. Anyway, in early July, when March leaders were planning their event, an apparent ally set up a website where marchers could pre-order anti-fascist t-shirts. That would be a fascist t-shirt, but okay. When the website appears to have been a trap set by the Antifa, or someone aligned with them, I guess I would comment, who turned around and published the names and addresses they'd collected from the website. Now the far right is trying to get their apparent anti-fascist trolls arrested. So I guess what they did here was they said, are you going to this next stupid set of rallies? You'll want our t-shirt, our anti-fascist t-shirt to wear there to troll the anti-fascists who have showed up to troll you. So you want one? I think they actually said they were free. Just sign up here, register, and pre-order your t-shirts and give us your mailing address, name and mailing address, so we can send you your free t-shirt. And apparently they all did that. And the anti-fascist guy said, what a bunch of dummies. They just gave us the names and addresses and identifying information for a bunch of avowed alt-right fascists. And let's publish that list. And so they did. Very interesting. Be careful what you sign up for out there. I don't know if I want to encourage such a thing, but it's kind of funny. An anonymous person registered a website for the National March Against Far-Left Violence in early July, Web Registry records show. An early version of the site encouraged fans to subscribe to its mailing list or pre-order T-shirts, which showed an anti-fascist symbol being damaged by the American flag. That is not necessarily how I would have described this. I guess the anti-fascist symbol, I don't know what they call it, but it's I guess those three arrows. It almost looks like a trident of sorts, and I don't know what that's supposed to be. I don't know what it's called. I don't know what the symbolism is, but it is in the graphic on the T-shirt. Apparently, it runs into a shield, and you know how those the Proud Boys and other weirdo alt-right paramilitary, I guess you would call them, although that would just thrill them to death. Losers, cosplayers, they carry the shields now at their marches. So it's a shield with an American flag on part of it, and it looks like the arrows of the Antifa logo of sorts are being deflected by the shield, but it's not even, I mean, the shield is very clearly and graphically bifurcated here. The American flag is on one side of it, and the arrows are bouncing off of the other side. So it's even a little bit of a stretch to say it's being damaged, I guess, and a stretch on top of that to say that it's being done by the American flag. But whatever. Okay. So, all right. An early version of the site encouraged fans to subscribe to the mailing list or order T-shirts. The site didn't ask for payment, just an address, so we can calculate shipping costs, although they said shipping's costs, which is an error. Privacy-savvy marchers might have known to avoid a web form asking for their information. The far right and its opponents often do wage controversial doxing campaigns against each other, with fascists and anti-fascists posting their rivals' personal details online in an attempt to intimidate them or reveal their identities. After the first Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where some white supremacists cited doxing campaigns, there's no where in there. Some white supremacists cited doxing campaigns as the reasons they would not participate in a future rally, which on balance, I guess, is still a good thing. Doxing, oh, we're so upset about it. Shouldn't happen. I hope it never happens to me. Yes. But I mean, if you're an avowed Nazi agitator, I don't know that I feel that bad about revealing who you are and getting you in trouble. Anyway, sorry. I mean, is it hypocritical? I don't know. I don't think so. But if it is, then okay. Yeah, it is. And it's great. There. Okay. That didn't stop approximately 36 people who allegedly signed up for the mailing list or tried to reserve anti-Antifa shirts. This week, days before the march, the site started publishing those people's names and sometimes their addresses. The following people still have not paid for their shirts that they ordered. They're maintaining the illusion to the end. The site's publishers wrote above a list of several dozen names. We're hardworking organizers who paid hard-earned money out of our own pockets to have these shirts printed. The fact that our fellow patriots are now shirking their obligations is alarming to us. I love this. Prospective marchers began raging at the event's organizers on the official Facebook page. One person whose name was revealed claimed to have never signed up for a t-shirt. Oh yeah, well, I never asked for one of those. It appears that a fake web page was set up in our name. We are not associated with it, so don't trust anything on it. This is only a Facebook page. Oh, wow, you're finally awake to that. The official March Facebook page wrote on Wednesday when followers began complaining. But marchers quickly pointed out that not only had the march's official Facebook page associated with the website, it had actually linked to it. So, lying as well. How dare you? BS, commented one person with a Pepe avatar. That site has been in your About page since July. You really effed up this time. You're the one that effed up, not me. Hours later, the Facebook page changed its story, editing its status to clarify that yes, they had promoted the site with the fake t-shirts, but only because a stranger had asked them to. Oh, I'm glad that they're all so smart. Oh, I only did it because a stranger. I mean, I don't think that's a quote, but kudos to our Daily Beast writer. By the way, let's flip up to the top. Oh yes, Kelly Wheel. I gave her proper credit for that. Kelly, that was fun. There's more to it, and maybe there's something equally funny in there. All right, so it was only because a stranger asked him to. This patriot came out of nowhere with an already built webpage saying it was built to donate to the cause, the Facebook moderators wrote. A gift to this cause. Turns out it's not, and it was a fake website made to lure people into it. We are sorry about that. One of the alleged trolls posted a screenshot of an alleged July 8th Facebook chat with march organizers in which he sent the completed website. Oh, neat. One organizer replied. Hours into the doxing campaign, march organizers started piecing together what had happened. Should take 5 minutes, guys. Some infiltrators created a website, and due to the share number of mutual friends, I trusted that it was legitimate. Sheer number? The number of mutual friends we shared? Something in between? Well, that's what the march's official Facebook account posted on Wednesday. They were just supposed to put out information, but instead put up a phony order form for T-shirts. T-E-A shirts. Oh, my Lord. This is why it took them so long. The infiltrator accounts are Ed Pinkley and Donnie Murphy, and I wonder whether they're real people. But the two Facebook accounts, neither of which used personal photos, appeared to have been created to look like generic far-right Facebook users. Pinkley's, which has since been deleted, was active since at least November 2017, befriending well-known members of right-wing movements and posting conservative memes. Murphy's account was created last month. From its Facebook account, the march claimed to have called the feds. Oh my, but I thought, small government and all that. Also, they don't trust the feds. They're out to get Trump, you know. The authorities have been notified and are extremely interested. They aren't, because it appears that interstate fraud has been committed. The page wrote, the Antifa infiltrators made a big mistake by attempting to take phony t-shirt orders because now they're engaged in an actual crime. But observers noted that this is the second recent occasion during which march organizer Mark Sahadi has attempted to coordinate a far-right event only for anti-fascists to sneak in. In May, Think Progress published leaked conversations from Sahadi's, it's S-A-H-A-D-Y, by the way, Sahadi's Boston-based group Resist Marxism, which revealed that the group, which outwardly railed against feminism, leftism, and political correctness, was actually tied to more openly extremist and white supremacist groups. JFC, you all know what that's supposed to mean. JFC, March, not KFC. JFC, Mark, one person wrote on the official March page, linking to the Think Progress article. This is the second time you've gotten infiltrated and gotten everyone around you doxxed in less than 3 months. One might wonder, for instance, whether or not he was the infiltrator. I think you should look into that. All you guys should absolutely spend all your time on that. Besides which, I guess I'll comment up top. I don't know whether he thinks people collected money for the t-shirts and that therefore that is why there was a crime. I suppose it's possible that it may be, I would imagine, a relatively minor crime to collect names and addresses under false pretenses, but then there was also the newsletter thing. I don't know. I think he might just be talking out of his ass and wants to scare people, and it's really just one step up from, I'm going to burn your house down, I know where you live, I'll ruin your credit rating. All the old online troll threats. All right, well, I thought that was really interesting and fun, and quite frankly, a good idea, and they should do it a lot. And so the rest of you should also likewise be careful when you sign up for anything. That's a lesson you all should have learned a long time ago, but whatever. I hope you are up to speed on all of that. Let's see. Other things that happened over the weekend, some of which much discussed already, and we don't need to touch on, others of which perhaps could use some additional attention. I guess everybody knows by now also about the story of Don McGahn, the White House counsel, and the story on him in the New York Times, which is a little difficult to unravel and has been spun extensively since, but was very interesting. And I guess the unraveling is, the question here is, was McGahn cooperating for real with Mueller? Was he doing so out of some sense of obligation? Was he doing so out of some sense of trying to cover himself and not be set up as the scapegoat for Trump's crimes later on? That's the prevailing theory, I think, and the one that the article attempts to portray as the leading theory. But then there's also, I guess, there's and the article lays this out too, the bizarre and, ultimately, I think, foolish, although thank God they did it, strategy from the Trump White House early on with his first set of Russia probe lawyers to actually cooperate and to waive executive privilege with respect to things like having Don McGahn speak to the investigators or other bits and pieces of information being revealed, documents being turned over, etc. I guess originally there was some strategy among the Trump lawyers, the outside lawyers, that appearing to be transparent and cooperative with the investigation would defuse things, lead to a quick end, and of course, since they had been assured by Trump and for some reason believed him because they know nothing about his history, that, that like he said, look, I haven't done anything wrong here. I'm not afraid to answer any questions. They will find out that there was no collusion. It's a witch hunt. It's rigged, etc. I don't know why anybody would believe him about anything, but apparently they did. And so they thought the thing to do here was waive privilege in many instances, figuring that would defuse criticism and end the probe ultimately. And then now it appears they've found out he's lying about all these things, and he really did do all this stuff. And like he's lied to every one of his lawyers in the past, he's lying to us now. We quit this case, except now the case is all effed up. And thank God, I guess. And we'll be digging into the consequences of that for some time now. Anyway, it was a rather lengthy article. Perhaps we'll save it for, really honestly, there'll probably be more and more interesting developments in the next couple of days about that, and we'll perhaps revisit the topic. Maybe that's something that Armando wants to comment on. But yeah, it's out there. Yeah, I know it. Yeah, it happened over the weekend. Yeah, you probably know all there is to know about it as well. And I don't think I have anything to add to it. So we'll just note it and move on from there. There are two other stories weighing on my mind here. Let's see, which direction shall we go to? Let's go over to here, this one, because this one's a step forward in a lot of Russian interference threads and election security threads, some of which stretch back years in the Daily Kos community. So you likely saw this one too. NBC News reporting this. Ken Delanian's byline from the 17th. Senator Bill Nelson, wasn't making things up, I didn't think he was, when he said Russians hacked Florida election systems. And I guess Yet another entry in the long-running series of stories alleging that the infiltration into official systems where, votes might actually be being counted or people's registrations can be changed actually happened. And I guess his allegations, Nelson's allegations, were based on essentially classified information. So he was in the position of having to say, yeah, by the way, this thing happened. And people who, are used to saying for whatever reason, oh, well, what's your proof, were dissatisfied with the fact that he did not produce that proof, but it is classified proof. I'll get to the story. Senator Bill Nelson, the subheader reads, who was in a tough re-election fight, was blasted for saying 10 days ago that Russians had penetrated his state's election systems. Maybe people thought he was overstating the case. Because it's happened before. I mean, that's been alleged before, and then new reports have clarified that, at least in other states, that, oh, well, what we really meant was they could have accessed XYZ, or they accessed an election vendor which could have used its trusted status to enter the state's elections administration systems, but it's unclear whether they did or not. But this seems to have laid out a more solid case here. Senator Bill Nelson, a Florida Democrat, has reaped the political whirlwind in the 10 days since he proclaimed that Russian hackers had, quote, penetrated some of his state's county voting systems. The governor of Florida, Rick Scott, a Republican who is running against Nelson for his U.S. Senate seat this fall, has blasted his claim as irresponsible. The top Florida elections official, also a Republican, said he had seen no indication it's true, and the Washington Post weighed in Friday with a 2,717-word fact check that all but accused Nelson, without evidence, of making it up. Well, NBC News, I guess, has learned differently. 3 people familiar with the intelligence tell NBC News that there is a classified basis for Nelson's assertion, which he made at a public event, properly labeled public event, yes, after being given information from the leaders of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The extent and seriousness of the threats remain unclear, shrouded for reasons of national security. The episode illustrates the extent to which secrecy, politics, and state-federal rivalries can stand in the way of a unified response to the threat from Russian attacks on a diffuse U.S. election system run by state and local officials. Through a spokesman, Nelson declined to comment. At an August 7th campaign event in Florida's capital, Nelson said intelligence committee leaders asked that he let supervisors of elections in Florida know that Russians are inside our records. He added that Russian hackers have already penetrated certain counties in the state, and they now have free rein to move about, although it's not entirely clear what that means. Either Bill Nelson knows of crucial information the federal government is withholding from Florida election officials, or he is strictly making things up, said Scott, who is seeking to take Nelson's Senate seat, which the senator has held since 2001. But Scott, who as governor has a security clearance, has not actually disputed Nelson's assertion. His spokesman said the governor had not personally called anyone at the Department of Homeland Security to seek a classified briefing to get to the bottom of the matter. The governor's appointee to supervise elections in Florida, Secretary of State Ken Detzner, was reaching out to federal officials for clarity, spokesman McKinley Lewis told NBC News. Detzner faced criticism this year for delaying an application for federal funds to improve Florida election security, only to be overruled by the governor. A February report by the left-leaning Center for American Progress gave Florida an F grade for election security, one of only 5 states that received a failing grade. Florida was one of 21 states notified by the Department of Homeland Security that it had been targeted by hackers in the 2016 election. NBC's sources declined to provide the exact details of what Nelson was attempting to describe because they remain classified. They said Nelson was talking about intelligence related to ongoing repercussions stemming from a 2016 hack of a Florida elections vendor, VR Systems, based in Tallahassee. They said the intelligence had been described to Nelson by Senators Richard Burr, Republican of North Carolina, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Mark Warner of Virginia, the ranking Democrat. A top-secret National Security Agency document leaked last year to the Intercept website said that VR systems had been penetrated in August of 2016 by hackers working for Russian military intelligence, and that the hackers likely used data obtained from that operation to launch a voter registration-themed spear phishing campaign targeting U.S. local government organizations. The NSA report didn't name the company, but it described some of its products, making clear which company was being referenced. The Intercept reported. VR Systems Chief Operating Officer Ben Martin did not respond to a request for comment. The report described a scheme in which Russian hackers tricked local government voter systems officials into clicking on bogus links that would allow the hackers to access credentials for voting systems. The report said it was unknown to what extent the campaign had been successful and what data on election-related hardware and software applications may have been obtained. The threat from that breach seems to be ongoing, a cybersecurity expert briefed on the matter told NBC News. In addition to Florida, VR Systems has contracts in California, Illinois, and Indiana, its website says. The sources say Nelson was not supposed to speak publicly about the matter, and he erred by suggesting that the information was new. Still, Nelson and Florida's other senator, Republican Marco Rubio, barely a senator, were asked to warn local officials about the ongoing threat to election systems by Russian state-sponsored hackers, two sources told NBC News. Rubio alluded to the matter with county officials in private, according to the Tampa Bay Times, which cited two sources who were in the room. None of the senators on the Intelligence Committee would confirm Nelson's assertions, nor would they deny it. While I understand your questions regarding Senator Nelson's recent public comments, I respectfully advise you to continue engaging directly with those federal agencies responsible for notifying you of and mitigating any potential intrusions, Burr said in a letter to Florida's top election official. The Department of Homeland Security also declined to confirm or deny Nelson's comments. Sarah Sendek, spokeswoman for the Department of Homeland Security, said in a statement, "While we are aware of Senator Nelson's recent statements, we have not seen any new compromises by Russian actors in election infrastructure. That said, we don't need to wait for a specific threat to be ready." Nelson's remarks came after he and Rubio sent a letter to Florida officials urging them to take seriously the threat of Russian election intervention. "We encourage you in the strongest terms to take advantage of help from federal officials," the letter said. Warner said in a statement that Russian activities continue to pose a threat to the security of our elections, as Senator Nelson and Rubio rightly pointed out in their letter. "I hope all state and local elections officials, including Florida's, will take this issue seriously." Rubio, who serves on the Intelligence Committee and has frequently expressed concerns about discussing classified information, declined to address Nelson's assertions directly. Given the importance of Florida in our national politics, our state's election systems have been and will be a potentially attractive target for attacks by foreign actors, the Republican senator said in a statement. Nelson, who has served in the past on the Intelligence Committee, has been unable to fully respond to the criticism of his comments, presumably because he spoke out of turn about classified information. When he made the remarks on August 7th, he was asked, "Do you know which records the Russians are accessing?" He replied, "That's classified." And that's the end of the article. So I guess he did know that it was classified information. It wasn't like that was a surprise to him, and he should have been able to guess that anyway. But here he says it explicitly. So, unwise to have brought it up because you know that questions would follow and then you'd be able to unable to answer them. But at any rate, I guess it does advance things somewhat in that we now at least know that the Senate Intelligence Committee is aware of yet another vendor who's been compromised. I guess they have information that indicates that the actual local officialdom may likewise have been penetrated as well. Certainly there's evidence of their having been targeted. but not the hard evidence that many are, I guess, still looking for with respect to whether or not official vote counting and vote registering offices and databases have in fact been compromised. All right, so a little bit less than I thought I was going to get out of that article, but an important development over the weekend, an important political development where Nelson's seat hangs in the balance, and he was subject, I think, to unfair attacks for having warned his state about their unreadiness. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We got one more segment to fill today and plenty to fill it with. Let's try this one. This was a piece that came to my attention just this morning. Is it brand new this morning? In fact, it is August 21st. That's today, 2018 and everything. Here's an interesting thing. I don't know if it stands up to the headline, much like the last piece we just read, but let's find out. The New York Times, with a piece by Amanda Taub and Max Fisher, Facebook fueled anti-refugee attacks in Germany, new research suggests, and it is just a suggestion. And of course, so like most social science research, you can't necessarily at this point or at any point just pin it right on Facebook, but it's an interesting suggestion and an interesting correlation. Let's take a look at it. Dateline here is Altena, Germany. When you ask local officials why Dirk Denkhaus, a young firefighter trainee who had been considered neither dangerous nor political, broke into the attic of a refugee group house and tried to set it on fire, this is a firefighter, they will list the familiar issues. This small riverside town is shrinking and its economy declining, they say. So economic anxiety, I guess. Leaving young people bored and disillusioned. So why not kill refugees? Though most here supported the mayor's decision to accept an extra allotment of refugees, some found the influx disorienting. Fringe politics are on the rise. But they'll often mention another factor not typically associated with Germany's spate of anti-refugee violence. Facebook. All right, what's up here, fellas? Everyone here has seen Facebook rumors portraying refugees as a threat. They've encountered racist vitriol on local pages, a jarring contrast with Altena's public spaces, where people wave warmly to refugee families. Many here suspected, and prosecutors would later argue, based on data seized from his phone, that Mr. Denkhaus had isolated himself in an online world of fear and anger that helped lead him to violence. This does sound familiar, doesn't it? This may be more than speculation. Little Altena exemplifies a phenomenon long suspected by researchers who study Facebook, that the platform makes communities more prone to racial violence. And now, the town is one of 3,000 plus data points in a landmark study that claims to prove it. Karsten Muller, or probably Mueller, we have that pronunciation problem here in the United States, but this is a M-U with the umlaut L-L-E-R, Mueller. Karsten Mueller and Carlo Schwartz, researchers at the University of Warwick. How do you pronounce that in the anglicized German? And are they like with the V, Warwick? Well, it's spelled Warwick, but how do Germans say it is the question. Anyway, I don't think that's that crucial to understanding what they did here. They scrutinized every anti-refugee attack in Germany. 3,335 in all over a 2-year span. In each, they analyzed the local community by any variable that seemed relevant: wealth, demographics, support for far-right politics, newspaper sales, number of refugees, history of hate crime, number of protests. One thing stuck out: towns where Facebook use was higher than average, like Altena, reliably experienced more attacks on refugees. That held true in virtually any sort of community: big city, small town, affluent or struggling, liberal haven or far-right stronghold, suggesting that the link applies universally. Their reams of data converged on a breathtaking statistic. Wherever... That was my breath being taken. Did you hear that? Oh, no. Hey, come back here with my breath. All right. Wherever... it took my brain with it, apparently. Here's the breathtaking statistic. Wherever per-person Facebook use rose to one standard deviation above the national average, attacks on refugees increased by about 50%. That is breathtaking. Do you think it'll stand up to scrutiny? I don't know. But let's continue on with the article. Nationwide, the researchers estimated in an interview, this effect drove 1/10 of all anti-refugee violence, which is actually, of course, not that much of it, but okay. The uptick in violence did not correlate with general web use or other related factors. This was not about the internet as an open platform for mobilization or communication. It was particular to Facebook. Wow, they got some thinking to do. Poor Zuckerberg. He just thought he was going to share pictures of hot college girls and talk about, rating them. And I mean, poor Zuckerberg. He's sitting on a pile of $1 billion, $1 billion paper dollars, but, he's living the lifestyle nonetheless. What can you do? This was your idea and you're sitting on the money, so you're going to have to answer for it. Other experts asked to review the findings called them credible, rigorous, and disturbing. The study bolstered a growing body of research, they said, finding that social media scrambles users' perceptions of outsiders, of reality, even of right and wrong. And it's beginning to ring true how better to describe what's going on here with the wackos we're dealing with in this country and their insistence on up being down. Facebook declined to comment on the study, but a spokeswoman said in an email, "Our approach on what is allowed on Facebook has evolved over time and continues to change as we learn from experts in the field." Okay, that's wide open, non-committal, as it should be, I think. The company toughened a number of restrictions on hate speech, including against refugees, during and after the study's sample period. Still, experts believe that much of the link to violence doesn't come through overt hate speech, but rather through subtler and more pervasive ways that the platform distorts users' picture of reality and social norms. We visited Altena and other German towns to retrace each step from the site's algorithm-driven news feed to real-world attacks that its users might not otherwise commit. And that hint at subtle but profound ways that the social network reshapes societies. This does sound like it's getting interesting. Here's a section titled, Separating Right from Wrong. When refugees first arrived, so many locals volunteered to help that Annette Wieseman, it's W-E-S-E-M-A-N, and Wieseman, I guess, we'll see, who runs Altena's Refugee Integration Center, couldn't keep up. She'd find Syrian or Afghan families attended by entourages of self-appointed life coaches and German tutors. It was really moving, she said. But when Mrs. Wieseman set up a Facebook page to organize food drives and volunteer events, it filled with anti-refugee vitriol of a sort she hadn't encountered offline. I guess where people can hide their faces and do it, they love it. Some posts appeared to come from outsiders, joined by a handful of locals. Over time, their anger proved infectious, dominating the page. Told about research linking Facebook to anti-refugee violence, Ms. Wieseman responded, "I would believe it immediately." And why Facebook? Again, I just did comment myself that, people love to be able to express those opinions anonymously and not get in trouble for them. The internet alone can do that. Why Facebook? I think it's the sharing function and the way things spread through networks. And if one anti-refugee person picks up on it because of whether it's the keyword or the algorithm directing to a story about refugee issues, thinking people who are interested in refugee issues like in a genuine and normal way, oh, I am interested in the refugee crisis, I will read this, versus I am trolling the internet looking for information about refugees and why we should hate them and kill them. I mean, both people will stumble on the same story according to the algorithm. And then, only one person has to get it, and then they can inject it into the rest of their network group of people who they know and don't know, in the town, outside of the town, in the country, outside of the country. There's no physical barriers to where your network can spread. And you're injecting it into that network with the purpose of inciting them against this development. And lo and behold, Facebook can produce that result for you. Such links would be indirect, researchers say, but begin with the algorithm that determines each user's news feed. The algorithm is built around a core mission: promote content that will maximize user engagement. Posts that tap into negative primal emotions like anger or fear, studies have found, perform best, and so proliferate. And so this is where you can understand, initially anyway, why this mistake would not be spotted among the Facebook programmers. These are Facebook coder geeks who just want, and what else would you design? Of course, we're going to design a system that will deliver people the content that they would find most interesting. And it probably just never occurred to them initially. What happens if that content is bad and just drives bad results and is being shared among bad people? It probably didn't occur to them, even though, like we said, they did initially start this thing to share pictures of co-eds, probably among bad people, essentially. They probably didn't think of themselves as particularly bad, but, there's gradations, I'm sure, in bro culture here. But, there weren't great motivations to start with. But, it's one of those things that we haven't yet purged from society, or even necessarily succeeded in labeling correctly with everyone. It's just one of those boys will be boys kind of thing. Look, they're going to look at pictures of the girls at school. That's what they do. And they're going to objectify them. That's what they do. Well, we could do something about that over the long term. But, people are too quick to dismiss stuff as, it's almost like it's a tradition, Well, like we know the facts about football injuries, but, it's American tradition. People love football, and it's not that easy to give up. And there's some validity to the fact that it's difficult to convince people of something that even they know is true if they're that attached to it. And, certainly tribalism is a strong attachment and drives a lot of things, and rooting for a football team is certainly tribalism. And there's ways in which there's parallels to tribalism in the sometimes relatively harmless, but still not really great, and something we ought to think about purging because it leads to other problems in the socialization of boys growing to manhood, that it's still like an okay thing to ogle the photos of the girls and speak disparagingly about them and objectify them. We got a lot of work to do on that front, but they probably think of it as harmless. And I mean, relative to violence and setting group homes on fire, I suppose it is, but who knows what it leads to. Just discussing, disdain for refugees isn't in itself dangerous either. It's what it leads to that's problematic. And, okay, so same story over here. We think it's not problematic that they people share opinions online about who's hot. Some people will say, okay, I see that's objectifying people, but hey, whatever, haha, and walk away. And then there are others, of course, who take the message and do insane things with it because they're mentally unbalanced to begin with. And, it's hard to blame it all on that one thing. But, I mean, I don't know. I guess if the data supports it, then you're stuck. If you're worried about violence against refugees and the data supports the idea that its dissemination on this platform leads to insane things like setting a group home on fire, well, then you can't really be surprised if somebody were to demonstrate to you that this harmless sharing of photos leads to at least some acts of violence. What are you going to do about it? All right. Well, anyway, we're getting too far afield from all of this. But we'll now get back to the story. So the algorithm is what we were talking about. The idea, our tangent began with the idea that it wouldn't be out of sorts for a person who's not a social psychologist to say, I'm building a computer network. I'm a computer guy. Whatever it is that people want to share, hopefully it's good things. We should build it in such a way that, what would make for a useful tool? Facebook. Why would people want to use it? Because it will give you what you want. Okay. And it takes some time and development and thinking and reacting to reality before anybody in that position is likely to realize, maybe that's actually not the way to go about things, or maybe there are really some negative repercussions that can come from all this feeding of people's desires for, more and more of that thing they want. Because, all it really would take is going to class and finishing your degree, which is something that I guess Zuckerberg didn't actually do. This is why liberal arts education is important. If you're a computer programmer, you might not get yourself a full broad spectrum liberal arts education. You might be focusing on your issue area, and BS science, Bachelor of Science students tend to do that. They have to. It's the requirements of their major, whereas, Bachelor of Arts majors, their requirements are a broader spectrum. But, I don't know. Do the BS students never take Psychology 101 or other introductory level things that would expose them, say, to the various trials and different experiments, whether human or animal experiments, where, it's very easy to have subjects fall into a pattern of demanding more and more of that thing which they crave, but which is not particularly good for them. And whether it's chickens pecking that button over and over, or monkeys hitting the button over and over again, or people either hitting buttons over and over again, or seeking solace in self-medication or whatever, it would eventually occur to a liberal arts student somewhere that, hey, we may be feeding an addiction center here. But I don't know if that occurs to math-focused, coding-focused science students. But I might be overgeneralizing. Surely some of them take psychology. It's just could be either they don't think of that connection, or they say, I don't care, or they say, I don't think that's true. I don't think that applies in this sense. I can stop using Facebook anytime I want to. So that core mission of the algorithm may be what's really at the heart of all this. That, to return to the article, is how anti-refugee sentiment, which combines fear of social change, economic anxiety, with us versus them rallying cries, two powerful forces on the algorithm, can seem unusually common on Facebook, even in a pro-refugee town like Altena. And if you are one of the lone anti-refugee folks in a pro-refugee town like Altena, it can look like you have worldwide support if you rig your online presence just so. So you're always given the sense that you're not alone out there, which is usually a good, or it certainly can be a good thing, right? The programmers of Facebook probably originally thought, to the extent they considered this issue at all, well, wouldn't it be a great thing if no matter where you lived, you could feel connected to the world and like you mattered, and there are others like you out there, even if you're isolated in a small farm town in wherever. Yes, but it can also mean that even if you live in a normal society where people realize we have obligations to refugees, if you're the odd person out here who thinks that all refugees should be murdered, you can also access a worldwide network of people who will say, yes, they should. And you'll feel great about doing it. Again, back to the article. But even if only a minority of users express vehement anti-refugee views, once they dominate the news feed, this can have consequences for everyone else. People instinctively conform to their community's social norms, which are normally a brake on bad behavior. This requires intuiting what the people around us believe, something we do through subconscious social cues, according to research by Betsy Paluck, a Princeton University social psychologist. Facebook scrambles that process. It isolates us from moderating voices or authority figures, siphons us into like-minded groups, and through its algorithm promotes content that engages our base emotions. I would also say it increasingly removes people from the socializing forces of the outdoors in their local community. They increasingly substitute actual locally based social interaction with time spent on Facebook. So in addition to the algorithm building a feedback loop that continues to build on itself so that you're more and more sucked into this bubble, as it were, it also keeps you from finding moderating forces in real life around you. It's very interesting that, I think it's a believable behavior here. People instinctively conform to their community's social norms, but if they both cut themselves off from their actual community and instead substitute for it an artificial community based around the flouting of those norms, well, then you're going to have problems. A Facebook user in Altena, for instance, might reasonably but wrongly conclude that their neighbors were broadly hostile to refugees. Oh, I should also throw in there, it's also subject to manipulation. It's not necessarily just a natural consequence of the algorithm feeding back on itself. You can, of course, or the whole system is subject to manipulation by trolls. It can be done by anyone, I guess. It's just that it turns out that most of the people who have discovered it and exploited the worst aspects of this phenomenon happen to be working on the far end of the right end of the spectrum. And you can purposefully manufacture what appears to be local sentiment against, let's say in this case, against refugees that doesn't exist locally, or really in some cases exist anywhere. But, once you find that there are people perhaps looking to either to see whether it exists or whether they're looking hopefully or warily to see whether it exists, they will find it. I mean, it has a flip side if you really feel like both sidesing everything. It just happens, and I saw the other day the freeway blogger who has been out under his real name out on Twitter and encouraging everybody to post signs of various kinds. And one of his latest comments was about how he posted some signs on his way through Denver and did so with the full knowledge and the hope, the understanding that this would be the case, that Denver natives seeing the signs posted, calling for and I think in this case the impeachment of President Trump, or at least labeling him as a traitor, as I recall, were signs posted by other Denver locals, even though it wasn't. But he knew full well that it was likely to be assumed that that was the case, and that Denver locals would believe, hey, there are other Denver locals just like me who also think this is a valuable message. So, I mean, in a sense, it's misleading and deceptive. But I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, I guess it is. It just purely is. It's just Facebook bubbling, but done in real life space. So perhaps it's less effective and there's less of a feedback loop, but it's certainly an attempt to sort of exploit the same assumption. All right, so where were we with this one? You can get the impression that there's a widespread community support for violence, and it changes your idea of whether, if you acted, you wouldn't be acting alone, said Dr. Paluck. In his office, Gerhard Pauli, a grandfatherly local prosecutor, flipped through printouts of social media posts that the police had pulled from Mr. Denkhaus's cell phone. He was very interested in Facebook, Mr. Pauli said. He paused over an image of wide-eyed, dark-skinned men, superimposed with the text, "The welfare ministry is out of money. It's back to work." Mr. Denkhaus messaged near constantly with friends to share articles and memes disparaging foreigners. At first, they trafficked in provocations, ironically addressing one another as Mein Führer. Trolling, in other words. Over time, they appeared to lose sight of the line separating trolling from sincere hate. Heavy social media users refer to this effect as irony poisoning. Interesting terminology. He said, and it's important to label it that way, and I'm glad they do self-label it that way. I mean, how often when people are caught in this thing do people say, well, I was being ironic, I was just joking, etc. He said to his partner one day, and now we have to do something, Mr. Pauli recalled. Mr. Denkhaus and a friend doused the attic of a refugee group house with gasoline and set it on fire. No one was hurt because, luckily so far, the memes don't include how to do things like this effectively. In court, his lawyer would argue that Mr. Denkhaus had shown no outward animus toward refugees before that night. It was only online that he dabbled in hate. Intended as exonerating, wasn't it the real world that mattered? This defense underscored how Facebook can provide a closed environment with its own moral rules. Mr. Denkhaus had little opportunity to encounter anti-refugee hatred in the real Altena, where overwhelmingly tolerant social norms prevailed. But within his Facebook echo chamber, he could drift unchecked toward extremism. Though Altena's residents condemned Mr. Denkhaus, his was not the last act of violence. Last year, the mayor was stabbed by a man said to be outraged by his pro-refugee policies. Mr. Pauli suspected a social media link. Local pages had filled with hateful comments toward the mayor just before the attack. We keep worrying about that here. Surveyors' marks and whatnot. Distorted social norms is our next section, and I can see we're running out of time, but let's just get through a little bit of this to give you a taste of what there is to follow and whether or not you'll want to read this on your own. These attacks may represent only the tip of a much larger iceberg, the university researchers said. Each person nudged into violence, they believe, hints at a community that has become more broadly hostile to refugees. For most users, the effect will be subtler, but by playing out more widely, perhaps more consequential. Traunstein, a Bavarian mountainside town, is in most ways quite different from Altena. Its tourist economy is thriving. Young people are active in the community. Though the town leans liberal, the surrounding region is solidly center-right. But, as in Altena, Facebook use and anti-refugee violence rates are both unusually high. Could that hint at more than a few isolated vigilantes? We sought out a particular kind of user, known to researchers as a super poster, who is thought to embody the ways that Facebook can make a community incrementally more hostile to outsiders. Rolf Wasserman, an artist whose studio overlooks Traunstein's quaint central square, is not politically influential in any traditional sense. Though conservative, he is hardly extremist, but he is furiously active on Facebook. He posts a steady stream of rumors, strident opinion columns, and news reports on crimes committed by refugees. Though none crosses into hate speech or fake news, in the aggregate they portray Germany as beset by dangerous foreigners. On Facebook, it's possible to reach people who are not highly political, to bring information to them, he said. You can build people's political views on Facebook. And boy, they have a picture of him here, I guess in his home or office, and some of his art, I guess, is displayed here. And let me just say that it begins to become clear. Super posters tend to be more opinionated, more extreme, more engaged, more everything, said Andrew Guess, a Princeton University social scientist. A lot of Princeton involved in this one. When more casual users open Facebook, often what they see is a world shaped by super posters like Mr. Wasserman. Their exaggerated worldview plays well in the algorithm, allowing them to collectively and often unknowingly dominate news feeds. Very interesting. I definitely recommend perusing the rest of this thing. We may even do it a little bit on a future show, just because I think there's so much that could be discussed that grows out of this. But it's time now to discuss all that can grow out of our friend Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, following us right here on Netroots Radio. And let's take a look quickly at what he has on his menu for today. Mick Mulvaney has been lobbying to exempt a friend's company from Trump's tariffs. Ryan Zinke caught red-handed trying to illegally sell off public lands, and top Dems want to know if John Bolton disclosed his work with the NRA-linked Russian spy Maria Butina on his security clearance application.
On netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Still more here on Justice's program. What about this one? A Georgia police chief defended tasering an 87-year-old grandmother for picking dandelions while not speaking English. And celebrity chef Jamie Oliver is accused of cultural appropriation for his microwavable travesty jerk rice. How jerky.